Being too available does not feel dangerous. It feels polite. It feels responsive. It feels like maturity. And that is precisely why it works so effectively at destroying status. Human beings do not consciously rank each other using spreadsheets or credentials. They rank intuitively through signals. Subtle, repeated signals that answer one silent question: how valuable is access to this person? Availability is one of the earliest and strongest of those signals. When someone is always reachable, always responsive, always ready, the mind does not interpret this as generosity. It interprets it as surplus. In every social hierarchy, professional, romantic, or interpersonal, what is abundant is assumed to be lower in value. What requires no effort to access is rarely respected. This is exactly how being too available begins to erode status before a single word is exchanged. Consider how quickly the brain makes these judgments. If someone replies instantly at all hours, rearranges their schedule on demand, or shows up whenever called, the subconscious conclusion forms automatically. This person has nothing more important competing for their attention. That conclusion may be false, but perception does not wait for verification. Status is not about intention. It is about interpretation. Being too available removes friction, and friction, uncomfortable as it sounds, is what creates weight. When access has no resistance, it has no gravity. The mind does not register it as significant. Over time, availability stops being appreciated and starts being expected. This is the first brutal truth hidden inside the title. Being too available will destroy your status. The damage occurs silently, passively, without confrontation. No one announces it. No one insults you openly. The downgrade happens internally in how people prioritize, delay, or dismiss you. Notice how this plays out in everyday dynamics. The person who is always free gets scheduled last. The person who doesn't mind gets interrupted. The person who responds fast gets overloaded. None of this feels aggressive, yet every interaction subtly reinforces a lower position. And this is where many people misunderstand the psychology. They believe availability earns goodwill. In reality, it earns dependency at best and disregard at worst. The social mind does not reward access, it exploits it. Not maliciously, but automatically. This is why high-status individuals across environments, leaders, decision-makers, influential figures, are rarely fully accessible. Not because they are arrogant, but because their time is structured, filtered, and protected. Access to them feels deliberate, not default. Contrast that with someone who is always just a call away. Their presence blends into the background. Their time becomes communal property. Their availability becomes an assumption rather than a favor. This is not about being cold. It is about how human beings read signals of value. Even children understand this instinctively. Toys that are always available lose their appeal. Toys that are limited create urgency and care. The same cognitive bias applies to people, no matter how uncomfortable that comparison feels. Being too available collapses anticipation. There is no space for curiosity, no pause for reflection, no cost for intrusion. And without cost, there is no respect. This is why the destruction of status often surprises the person experiencing it. They feel helpful, supportive, present, yet find themselves overlooked, undervalued, or taken for granted. The contradiction feels unfair, but it is psychologically consistent. Availability teaches others how to treat you. When you remove all barriers to access, you remove the signal that your time has weight. And once time loses weight, so does voice, so does influence, so does presence. This is the quiet mechanism behind the title. Being too available will destroy your status. It does not require arrogance, incompetence, or failure. It requires only one thing: unrestricted access. Recognizing this pattern is not about withdrawing or punishing others. It is about understanding that status begins with how access is structured. Before words, before competence, before effort, availability speaks first. One of the most damaging myths people carry is the belief that status is a reward for effort, that if you show up consistently, respond quickly, and make yourself useful, respect will naturally follow. In reality, status does not operate on effort. It operates on interpretation. Human beings do not observe how much energy you expend. They observe what your behavior signals about your position. And being too available sends a signal that quietly overrides all visible effort. This is the second brutal layer beneath the idea that being too available will destroy your status. The mind assigns rank before it evaluates contribution. Status is a shortcut judgment. The brain constantly asks, where does this person sit relative to me? Above, equal, below. That judgment happens fast, emotionally, and subconsciously. Availability feeds directly into that calculation. When someone is always responsive, always accommodating, always flexible, the brain does not say, this person is disciplined and generous. It says, this person is adjustable. And adjustable things are rarely treated as fixed points of authority. Effort feels virtuous to the person giving it. But perception is indifferent to virtue. This is why two people can do the same work and receive completely different levels of respect. One protects access, the other offers it freely. The first is seen as composed and valuable. The second is seen as eager and replaceable. Availability reshapes perception in three critical ways. First, it reframes motivation. When someone is consistently available, others assume the motivation is need rather than choice. Choice signals power. Need signals dependence. Even when that assumption is incorrect, perception settles quickly and resists revision. Second, it distorts hierarchy. High-status individuals are expected to have constraints, meetings, priorities, obligations. When you appear unconstrained, the mind subconsciously places you lower in the hierarchy, regardless of your actual role or competence. Third, it erases distinction. If everyone can reach you at any time, access to you feels ordinary, and ordinary access produces ordinary treatment. This is exactly how availability destroys status without confrontation. No one insults you. No one challenges you openly. They simply stop treating your time, attention, and opinions as scarce. Notice how this plays out in professional environments. The employee who responds instantly to every message becomes the default problem solver, but rarely the decision maker. Their effort increases while their authority plateaus. Over time, they are seen as reliable infrastructure, not leadership material. In social environments, the same pattern repeats. The person who is always free becomes the backup plan. Invitations arrive late. Cancellations happen easily. Their presence is assumed rather than valued. This is not cruelty. It is pattern recognition. Human beings learn how to treat you based on how you treat your own time. When you give it away freely, others unconsciously assume it costs you nothing. And once something appears to cost nothing, it is rarely respected. This is why explaining your effort never restores status. You can say you are busy. You can explain your workload. You can justify your responsiveness. None of it works because status is not negotiated verbally. It is inferred behaviorally. This is the trap many fall into. They feel misunderstood, so they try harder. They become even more available, hoping effort will correct perception. Instead, the opposite happens. The signal strengthens. The downgrade accelerates. Being too available teaches others that your time is elastic. Elastic time belongs to whoever pulls it. High-status individuals understand this intuitively. They are not careless with access. They do not over-explain delays. They do not rush to prove usefulness. Their availability feels intentional, not reactive, and that distinction matters. Intentional access signals choice. Reactive access signals obligation. This is why the title being too available will destroy your status is not a warning about kindness or cooperation. It is a warning about misunderstanding how perception works. Status is not built by doing more. It is built by signaling that your time has structure, limits, and competing priorities. When effort is paired with boundaries, it earns respect. When effort is paired with unrestricted availability, it earns dependence. If effort alone determines status, the most exhausted people would be the most respected. They are not. Perception assigns rank long before contribution is evaluated. Protecting access is not arrogance. It is how the mind decides who matters. To understand why being too available destroys status, it is necessary to understand a cognitive shortcut the human mind relies on constantly: the scarcity heuristic. The scarcity heuristic is simple. What is rare feels valuable. What is abundant feels disposable. This bias operates beneath logic, beneath ethics, beneath conscious intention. It shapes how people assign importance to objects, opportunities, and people without asking permission. When someone is rarely available, the mind does not just notice their absence. It fills that absence with assumed value. The delay itself becomes information. The wait creates weight. This is exactly why being too available undermines status at a psychological level. It removes the one condition that triggers valuation: scarcity. Consider how anticipation works. When access is limited, the mind prepares. It pays attention. It remembers. When access is unlimited, the mind postpones. It drifts. It deprioritizes. Availability collapses anticipation. And without anticipation, there is no psychological elevation. This is why rare interactions feel meaningful even before they occur. The mind assumes that if access is limited, it must be intentional, and intentional limitation is read as power. The mistake many people make is assuming scarcity must be artificial or manipulative. In reality, scarcity emerges naturally from structure, from priorities, from constraints, from a life that is not perpetually open for interruption. Being too available removes all of that context. When someone replies instantly, agrees immediately, and rearranges without friction, the mind receives no signal that access required negotiation or cost. The interaction feels weightless, and weightless interactions do not command respect. This is not about making people wait as a tactic. It is about what constant availability communicates unintentionally. It communicates that your time is unclaimed, that your attention is idle, that access to you carries no opportunity cost, and the mind reacts accordingly. This is why scarcity does not need to be explained. It explains itself. No announcement is required. No justification is needed. The absence does the work. In contrast, availability invites explanation, and explanation lowers status. The more you explain your openness, the more you reinforce that access to you is negotiable. This is visible across every hierarchy. Leaders are harder to reach than subordinates. Mentors are harder to access than students. High-status figures have gates, filters, and buffers, not as arrogance, but as structural necessity. Scarcity surrounds them because demand exceeds supply. When you remove all barriers, you reverse that equation. Supply exceeds demand, and the mind adjusts value downward automatically. This is why people often misread their own intentions. They believe they are being generous with their time. Others experience it as convenience. Convenience does not inspire respect, it inspires casual use. Over time, this leads to a dangerous shift. People stop asking permission for your time. They assume it. Messages become interruptions. Requests become expectations. Delays are interpreted as failures rather than boundaries. This is the silent erosion the title warns about. Being too available will destroy your status. The destruction is not dramatic, it is incremental. It shows up as shorter messages, later replies from others, less consideration, more last-minute demands, fewer apologies. All of it traces back to one cognitive shortcut: scarcity equals value. When scarcity disappears, so does perceived importance. High-status individuals do not fight for attention. Their limited access creates it. Their absence makes their presence heavier. Their time feels protected and therefore worth respecting. This is why restoring status never begins with persuasion. It begins with reintroducing structure, with allowing gaps, with letting access be conditional rather than automatic. The mind does not argue with scarcity. It adapts to it. Scarcity is not manipulation, it is interpretation. The mind values what it cannot access freely. When availability is unlimited, importance evaporates. Protecting access is not strategy. It is how human perception assigns worth. One of the most uncomfortable realizations behind the idea that being too available will destroy your status is this. Human beings rarely interpret availability as kindness. They interpret it as need. This interpretation happens quietly, without accusation, without conscious judgment. Yet once it forms, it reshapes the entire dynamic. When someone is consistently available, replying immediately, agreeing without hesitation, adjusting plans effortlessly, the mind does not say, "This person is generous." It says, "This person requires engagement," and requirement implies dependence. Kindness is optional, need is not. This distinction matters because status depends on perceived choice. High-status behavior appears chosen, not compelled. When availability looks automatic, it no longer feels voluntary, it feels driven. Even when the individual feels calm, self-sufficient, and emotionally stable, their availability can still be read as hunger for relevance. The signal overrides the intention. This is why over-availability damages status, even among emotionally mature people. The mind does not audit motives, it reads patterns. If someone is always there, the subconscious question arises. Why are they always there? The mind fills the gap with assumptions, rarely flattering ones. This is how being too available quietly reframes your role. You stop being a peer and start being a resource. Resources are useful, but they are not respected in the same way equals are. Notice how this plays out socially. The person who always answers becomes the person others unload on. The one who never declines becomes the one others lean on without reciprocity. Their availability invites emotional offloading, not admiration. And once that shift happens, it is hard to reverse, because need-based roles are sticky. People grow comfortable placing weight on you without offering balance. The danger is that nothing feels overtly wrong at first. You are included, you are contacted, you are relied upon. Yet something subtle changes: tone, timing, priority. Your opinions are acknowledged but not deferred to. Your presence is welcomed but not waited for. Your absence is noticed but not missed. This is the brutal truth behind availability. The more consistently you offer access, the more likely others are to assume you need the interaction more than they do. And status collapses the moment that assumption takes root. This is not because people are cruel. It is because social hierarchies are built on asymmetry. The one who needs less controls more. The one who appears to need more yields ground automatically. Being too available flips that balance without a single word being spoken. If your availability is interpreted as need, status erodes even if your intentions are pure. Respect follows perceived choice, not constant presence. When access looks automatic, the mind assumes dependence, and dependence quietly lowers rank. Status begins eroding the moment other people feel entitled to your availability. This is the second brutal truth behind the idea that being too available will destroy your status. When you make yourself endlessly accessible, you allow others to set the terms of your time. And people rarely respect boundaries they did not have to negotiate. Boundaries only register as boundaries when they exist independently of demand. If your availability adjusts instantly to requests, the mind concludes that access to you is flexible, and flexibility signals subordination in social hierarchies. The psychology here is subtle but consistent. When someone reaches out and receives immediate compliance, their brain learns a rule. This person can be accessed on my timeline. That rule becomes an expectation. Over time, expectation hardens into entitlement. Once entitlement forms, any delay feels like resistance. Any absence feels like neglect. And any boundary you attempt to introduce later feels unnatural, even offensive. This is why people often react poorly when an overly available person suddenly pulls back. The boundary itself is not the problem. The problem is that the boundary was not always there. High-status individuals rarely need to enforce boundaries explicitly because access to them was never unconditional to begin with. Their availability is structured. Their time is filtered. Others adapt without complaint because the rules were never ambiguous. In contrast, when you are always reachable, always adjustable, always accommodating, you train people to believe that your time is public space. And public space does not command respect, it invites use. This is where many people misunderstand kindness. They believe generosity creates goodwill. But in status dynamics, generosity without structure creates ownership. The more people feel they can summon you at will, the less they consider whether they should. This dynamic shows up everywhere. Messages sent without context, calls placed without warning, requests made without acknowledgement of inconvenience. None of it is malicious. It is learned behavior. Being too available teaches others that your boundaries are movable, and movable boundaries are not perceived as boundaries at all. Once others begin setting the rhythm of your time, your status shifts. You are no longer perceived as someone with an independent schedule. You are perceived as someone waiting to be activated. That perception alone is enough to lower rank. This is why reclaiming status is not about asserting dominance or confrontation. It is about re-establishing authorship over access. When boundaries exist by default, respect follows automatically. People do not resent boundaries. They resent losing access they assumed they owned. If others are setting the terms of your availability, your status has already been compromised. Respect begins where access stops being automatic. Authority is not announced, it is inferred. And one of the fastest ways to undermine that inference is over-responsiveness. This is the third brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. The speed at which you respond silently communicates your position in the hierarchy. When someone responds instantly, every time, without exception, the mind does not register efficiency. It registers urgency. And urgency suggests that the message carried more weight for you than for them. Authority, by contrast, feels unhurried. High-status individuals are not defined by silence alone, but by controlled timing. Their responses arrive when appropriate, not when summoned. That delay, whether minutes or hours, signals that their attention is governed internally, not externally. Over-responsiveness reverses that signal. It tells others that interruptions reach you easily, that their priorities override yours, that your attention is standing by, waiting to be deployed. None of this needs to be stated. The pattern speaks for itself. This is why over-responsive people are often trusted, but rarely deferred to. They become reliable executors, not respected authorities. In professional settings, this shows up clearly. The person who replies immediately to every request becomes the default problem solver, but not the decision maker. Their speed trains others to bypass hierarchy and route pressure directly to them. Authority erodes not because they lack competence, but because their availability suggests they are downstream from decisions, not upstream. Socially, the same dynamic applies. The friend who always replies instantly becomes emotionally available, but not influential. Their presence is comforting, but their opinions carry less weight. The mind associates authority with composure. Composure requires space. When there is no space between stimulus and response, composure disappears, even if the tone remains calm. This is why leaders are rarely the fastest to respond. Not because they are careless, but because they are selective. Their attention moves deliberately. Their responses feel measured, not reactive. Over-responsiveness strips interactions of that weight. It creates the impression that your time is unguarded. And unguarded time does not feel authoritative, it feels accessible. Once that perception forms, it is difficult to reverse through explanation. You cannot argue yourself into authority. Authority emerges from behavioral patterns that signal control. This is the silent cost of being too available. Every instant response reinforces a hierarchy where others initiate and you react. And in status dynamics, the reactor rarely holds power. Speed feels productive, but authority feels composed. When responsiveness becomes automatic, it signals urgency, not control. If others can summon your attention at will, authority dissolves without resistance. One of the most counterintuitive consequences of availability is this: the easier someone is to access, the easier they are to postpone. This is the fourth brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. Constant access does not increase engagement, it reduces urgency. When someone knows they can reach you at any time, the mind quietly deprioritizes you. There is no pressure to respond now because access is assumed later. This creates a paradox where availability leads not to attention, but to delay. The brain operates on prioritization. It elevates what might disappear. It defers what feels permanent. If you are always reachable, your presence feels guaranteed. And guaranteed things are rarely treated as time-sensitive. This is why overly available people often experience being left on read, answered last, or contacted only when convenient. Not because they lack value, but because their value is not protected by scarcity. The moment access feels unlimited, engagement becomes optional. This dynamic plays out quietly. Messages are read but not answered. Plans are tentatively agreed to, then changed. Conversations drift without closure. None of this feels aggressive, yet all of it reflects a lowered priority. Being easy to access removes consequence. If someone delays responding to a high-status individual, there is risk. The window may close. The opportunity may pass. With an overly available person, there is no such risk. They will still be there. This is how availability breeds invisibility. Over time, others stop accounting for your time altogether. They assume you will adjust. They assume you will wait. They assume you will accommodate the gap. And those assumptions reshape status. People do not ignore what they fear losing. They ignore what they assume will remain. This is why high-status individuals often appear busy even when they are not. Their time feels occupied. Their attention feels limited. Their availability feels conditional. That condition creates focus. In contrast, being constantly open creates mental background noise. Your presence blends into the environment rather than standing out within it. This is the hidden mechanism behind the title "Being Too Available Will Destroy Your Status." Availability does not make you central. It makes you peripheral. You become the option that requires no decision, and options that require no decision are the easiest to ignore. Attention follows risk, not comfort. When access to you feels guaranteed, engagement loses urgency. Protecting availability is not withdrawal, it is how presence retains weight. Consequences are the invisible currency of status, and being too available quietly eliminates them. This is the fifth brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. When access to you is guaranteed, others no longer risk losing anything by mistreating your time. Consequences do not require confrontation. They emerge naturally when access is conditional. When presence can be withdrawn, not as punishment, but as a natural outcome of priorities. Availability removes that condition. If someone knows you will still answer tomorrow, still show up next time, still accommodate after being dismissed, then their behavior carries no cost. Delays become safe. Disrespect becomes survivable. Thoughtlessness becomes habitual. This is not because people are intentionally exploitative. It is because the human mind calibrates behavior based on loss. When loss is impossible, restraint disappears. This is why high-status individuals are treated carefully even when they are agreeable. Their absence is felt as a cost. Their disengagement carries weight. Others adjust behavior preemptively to avoid that loss. In contrast, the overly available person absorbs friction without consequence. Missed calls are tolerated. Late replies are forgiven instantly. Cancellations are met with understanding every time. Each accommodation feels minor, but together they send a powerful signal. There is no penalty for deprioritizing me, and once that signal is learned, it is reinforced. People begin to test boundaries unconsciously. They push delays slightly longer. They ask a little more. They give a little less. Not out of malice, but because nothing pushes back. This is how availability collapses leverage. Leverage does not come from aggression. It comes from optionality. From the quiet knowledge that access can be lost. When you are always available, optionality disappears. You remove your own ability to disengage without explanation. And without that ability, your presence stops influencing behavior. This is the moment status truly erodes, not when you are ignored, but when your absence would change nothing. Being too available ensures that absence never arrives. This is why restoring status does not begin with demanding better treatment. Demands without consequences feel hollow. Status is enforced by structure, not speech. When access becomes conditional again, behavior adjusts automatically. Respect follows consequence. If your availability guarantees your return regardless of treatment, others learn they lose nothing by deprioritizing you. Status survives only where access is not assured. There is a point where availability stops being appreciated and starts being used. This is the sixth brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. You slowly transform from a person into emotional infrastructure. Infrastructure is reliable. Infrastructure is necessary. Infrastructure is rarely respected. When someone is always available, others begin routing their emotional weight through them. Stress, frustration, indecision, boredom, all of it finds a resting place. The interaction stops being mutual and becomes directional. You absorb, they unload. This shift is subtle. It does not announce itself. At first, it feels like trust, like closeness, like being important. But importance without reciprocity is not status, it is function. Once you become emotional infrastructure, people stop considering your internal state. They do not ask if it is a good time. They assume availability. They assume capacity. They assume resilience. Your presence becomes background support, not a valued exchange. And infrastructure does not get consulted. It gets leaned on. This is why overly available people often feel drained yet underappreciated. They are heavily used but lightly regarded. Their emotional labor stabilizes others while quietly destabilizing their own position. Status requires distinction. Infrastructure blends into the system. The moment people begin interacting with you primarily to regulate themselves, rather than to engage with you as an equal, status has already shifted. This dynamic also explains why emotional infrastructure is rarely defended. When others disrespect or ignore you, no one intervenes. Infrastructure is expected to endure loads silently. Being too available trains people to treat your emotional capacity as infinite, and infinite resources are not protected, they are consumed. High-status individuals are not cold. They are selective. They do not absorb emotional chaos on demand. Their availability is filtered, not open. That filter preserves distinction. Without it, you become the place where others stabilize themselves, while your own standing erodes. This is one of the most painful consequences of availability because it masquerades as closeness. But closeness that flows in one direction is not connection. It is extraction. If interactions consistently flow toward unloading rather than exchange, availability has turned you into infrastructure. Status requires reciprocity. When access is unconditional, respect is optional. Availability does not attract everyone equally. It attracts a specific pattern. This is the seventh brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. Over-availability draws in low-status dynamics while quietly repelling high-status ones. People with stable boundaries rarely rely heavily on others for regulation. They manage their time. They respect limits. They do not need constant access. But people who lack structure emotionally or socially, gravitate toward those who are always open. Availability becomes a magnet for chaos. This is not a moral judgment. It is behavioral gravity. When someone is always reachable, they become a soft landing, a place where demands face no resistance. Over time, the interactions shift from balanced exchange to constant pull. High-status individuals notice this pattern quickly. They avoid environments where access feels unstructured. They are not drawn to those who are always available, because constant availability signals a lack of selectivity. Selectivity is a status marker. Being too available communicates that you do not filter who receives your time. And if everyone qualifies, no one feels special. This is why over-availability subtly reshapes your social environment. The people who remain are those who benefit from unrestricted access. The people who value mutual respect drift away, not with hostility, but with disinterest. This creates a feedback loop. As your environment fills with low-demand, high-need interactions, your status erodes further. You are seen in the context of those dynamics. Social positioning is contagious. Over time, you are not just available, you are associated with availability. And availability, in status terms, feels adjacent to subordination. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of availability. People believe openness expands opportunity. In reality, openness without structure attracts dependence more than respect. High-status dynamics require friction. They require selectivity. They require the implicit understanding that access must be earned through alignment, not demanded through convenience. When availability removes all friction, the quality of interactions degrades. This is not because people are malicious. It is because systems move toward least resistance. Over-availability makes you that path. If your interactions are dominated by people who demand more than they offer, availability has already reshaped your environment. Status improves not by adding people, but by filtering access. Negotiation power is not created at the table. It exists long before the conversation begins. This is the eighth brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. When your availability is obvious, your leverage evaporates silently before any terms are discussed. Negotiation is not just about offers and counter-offers. It is about perceived options. The side believed to have alternatives holds power. The side believed to be waiting holds none. Over-availability communicates waiting. When you respond immediately, agree quickly, and adjust easily, the mind concludes that you have fewer competing demands. Fewer demands imply fewer options, and fewer options imply weaker leverage. This is why people who are always available receive worse terms without protest. Lower compensation. Shorter notice. Less flexibility in return. None of it requires hostility. The imbalance is assumed. The negotiation never becomes explicit because it doesn't need to. Your behavior has already answered the most important question: how badly do you want this? Availability answers it loudly. If you are always reachable, the assumption forms that you are eager. If you are eager, you are unlikely to walk away. And if you are unlikely to walk away, others feel no pressure to offer better conditions. This is how status loss occurs without conflict. No one pushes you down. You step down by signaling urgency. High-status individuals rarely appear eager, not because they lack interest, but because they protect ambiguity. Ambiguity preserves leverage. It leaves open the possibility that they have other options, even if they don't. Being too available destroys that ambiguity. The moment others believe your time is idle, they stop competing for it. Competition creates value. Availability eliminates it. This is why explaining your worth never restores negotiation power. Leverage is not logical, it is perceived. And perception is shaped by patterns, not arguments. Every fast reply, every instant agreement, every unnecessary accommodation. Each one quietly informs the other side that pressure works on you. And once pressure works, it will be used. Negotiation power lives in optionality. When availability suggests eagerness, leverage disappears before discussion begins. Protecting access is not manipulation. It is how terms remain negotiable. The final brutal truth is the most difficult to accept because it places responsibility where it cannot be outsourced. People treat you the way your behavior teaches them to. This is the ninth brutal truth behind why being too available will destroy your status. Availability is a form of self-pricing, and others rarely price you higher than you price yourself. When you give unrestricted access to your time, attention, and energy, the signal is clear, even if unintentional. The signal is that these resources are plentiful, and what is plentiful is not protected. No explanation can override this signal. You can speak confidently. You can perform competently. You can contribute meaningfully. But if your availability suggests low cost, others will interact with you accordingly. Status is not what you say you deserve. It is what your behavior enforces. This is why attempts to demand respect after prolonged overavailability often fail. The demand contradicts the established pattern. People respond to consistency, not claims. Your availability has already written the rulebook. This does not mean others are malicious. It means they are adaptive. They mirror the value cues you project. If you interrupt yourself for others, they will interrupt you. If you prioritize others over yourself, they will do the same. If you treat your time as flexible, they will treat it as disposable. Being too available teaches others that your time bends easily. And what bends easily does not feel solid. High-status individuals rarely need to assert worth. Their boundaries do it for them. Their access feels deliberate. Their presence feels chosen, not reactive. That choice is the signal. Once that signal is missing, status decays quietly. People do not decide to disrespect you. They simply stop accounting for you. This is the final warning embedded in the title. Being too available will destroy your status. No one assigns your value in isolation. They read it from how you behave. Availability is not neutral. It is information. And people respond to it precisely. If others undervalue your time, examine how you offer it. Status is mirrored, not negotiated. When access is unconditional, perceived value adjusts downward automatically. Status rarely collapses in a single moment. It erodes through patterns that feel ordinary. This section exists to help recognize when being too available is already destroying your status, often without you realizing it. The first signal is not disrespect. It is assumption. People stop asking if you are free. They start assuming you are. Messages arrive without context. Requests arrive without notice. Your time is treated as open by default. This is not closeness. It is entitlement learned through repetition. The second signal is delay asymmetry. You respond quickly. Others do not. Your messages are acknowledged late, answered briefly, or left open-ended. This imbalance indicates that urgency flows in one direction only, and it is not in your favor. The third signal is last-minute behavior. Plans are proposed late. Changes are communicated casually. Cancellations arrive without apology. These behaviors emerge only when someone believes your time has no competing value. The fourth signal is emotional offloading without reciprocity. People come to you stressed, confused, or frustrated, but rarely ask how you are. Conversations flow toward unloading, not exchange. You are used to stabilize others, not engaged as an equal. The fifth signal is invisible effort. You contribute consistently, but credit feels diffuse. Your reliability becomes background noise. When things work, it's expected. When you pause, it's noticed negatively. This is one of the most dangerous stages of status erosion because nothing feels overtly hostile. You are still included, still contacted, still needed, but you are no longer considered, and consideration is the true currency of status. Many people misinterpret these signs as temporary phases or communication issues. They are not. They are behavioral feedback. They indicate that availability has trained others to treat access to you as guaranteed. This is why correcting status loss does not begin with confrontation. Confrontation addresses behavior. Status loss originates in perception. Until perception shifts, behavior will revert. Recognizing these signals early matters because once they compound, pulling back feels disruptive, not because it is wrong, but because it contradicts expectation. And expectation is what availability builds. If people assume access, delay response, or load emotional weight without reciprocity, availability has already rewritten your position. Awareness is the first form of defense, because status cannot be protected if it is misunderstood. When people first recognize that being too available will destroy their status, a common fear appears. If I become less available, won't I seem cold, manipulative, or distant? This fear is understandable and incorrect. There is a critical difference between strategic unavailability and emotional withdrawal. Confusing the two is what keeps many people trapped in low-status dynamics. Emotional withdrawal is reactive. Strategic unavailability is structural. Withdrawal happens when someone feels hurt, overwhelmed, or resentful. It appears suddenly. It is charged. It seeks reaction. Others feel punished, confused, or tested. Strategic unavailability, on the other hand, is calm and predictable. It does not announce itself. It does not demand explanation. It simply reflects a life with priorities. This distinction matters because status is damaged not by absence, but by volatility. High-status individuals are not unpredictable emotionally. They are predictable structurally. Their availability follows patterns, not moods. They do not disappear to provoke concern. They do not delay responses to create anxiety. They do not withhold access as leverage. They are simply not instantly accessible. This is why their absence does not feel hostile. It feels normal. When availability is reduced cleanly, without justification, without apology, it signals self-governance. Self-governance signals status. Emotional withdrawal seeks control. Strategic unavailability reflects independence. The difference is intention, but more importantly, consistency. If availability fluctuates dramatically based on emotional state, people perceive instability. Instability lowers trust and status. But when availability is steady and limited, people adapt without resentment. This is why explaining boundaries often backfires. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation implies flexibility. Flexibility invites testing. High-status boundaries are not defended verbally. They are demonstrated behaviorally. This is the protective lesson behind the title. Reducing availability is not about controlling others. It is about removing yourself from reactive patterns that train people to devalue access. When availability feels intentional rather than emotional, respect recalibrates automatically. Unavailability preserves status only when it is calm, consistent, and non-reactive. Withdrawal seeks reaction, structure signals value. The mind respects patterns, not explanations. There is a final illusion that must be dismantled to fully understand why being too available will destroy your status. That illusion is the belief that status is defended through explanation. It is not. Status is protected through absence. Human beings do not recalibrate respect when they are told to. They recalibrate when access changes, when availability shifts quietly, without drama, without justification, without negotiation. Explanation invites debate. Absence ends it. Throughout this documentary, every brutal truth pointed to the same underlying mechanism. Availability is information. It teaches others how much your time costs, and once that price is learned, it is rarely questioned. This is why overavailability is so dangerous. It does not feel like weakness. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels socially correct. But status is not governed by morality. It is governed by perception. The mind asks only one question: is access to this person automatic or intentional? Automatic access feels cheap. Intentional access feels valuable. This is why the highest status individuals do not explain delays. They do not announce boundaries. They do not justify unavailability. Their time is simply structured. and structure signals value without words. When you over-explain, you imply permission is required. When you over-respond, you imply urgency. When you over-accommodate, you imply flexibility. Each of these erodes status in isolation. Together, they dismantle it completely. This is the quiet tragedy of availability. People lose status not because they are incompetent, unkind, or incapable, but because they are perpetually reachable. And the correction is not aggression, not manipulation, not withdrawal. It is restraint. Restraint in response. Restraint in access. Restraint in availability. Restraint creates gravity. Gravity pulls respect without force. This is why status recovers not when you demand better treatment, but when you become harder to schedule, harder to interrupt, harder to summon without intention. Absence forces recalibration. When you are not always there, people notice when you are. When you are not instantly responsive, your replies carry more weight. When access is no longer guaranteed, it becomes valuable again. This is not punishment, it is signal correction. And importantly, this shift does not require you to change who you are. It requires you to stop leaking access unconsciously. The most respected people are not the least available, but they are never the most available. They understand something fundamental about human psychology. Presence gains value only when it can be missed. If your absence would change nothing, your presence already means too little. This is the final truth embedded in the title. Being too available will destroy your status. Status is not created by effort alone. It is preserved by selectivity, and selectivity is not cruelty. It is self-respect made visible. You do not protect status by explaining your worth. You protect it by structuring access. When availability becomes intentional, respect follows automatically, without argument, without conflict, without force.